this young generation, because of all the reasons we talked about and more, seems to exhibit the traits of being very comfortable, very uncomfortable with uncomfortable. That has some impact that are sometimes funny, quote unquote, but always tend to make somebody feel more lonely. So, for example, and I've seen this happen, I've heard about these stories so many times. A young employee who may feel they're in line for a raise, but is so uncomfortable to go to their boss and ask for a raise, they just quit. They would rather quit than have an uncomfortable conversation. And then sometimes it is followed by an angry email that says, I'm undervalued, you don't appreciate me, you underpay me, you know? And I've heard it happen so many times where the leadership is like, what? We would have happily, like, so we were either planning on giving you a raise, we'd happily give you a raise, you know? And it's really uncomfortable to walk in your boss's office and be like, hey, I'm working really hard, can I have a raise? Now, the time you do get to quit is when you've had this conversation 4, 5, 6 times and you've seen nothing and had no feedback and had no impact. Then absolutely you quit. And absolutely you say, you undervalue me, you underappreciate me, underappreciate me. We've had this conversation 5 or 6 times. Then it's their fault because they had all the information. But again, it's really funny how many young kids they would rather quit than have a difficult conversation, or they'd rather break up and have a difficult conversation, or worse, they'd rather ghost someone than break up with them, because it's really uncomfortable to have a fight and a breakup and call each other names. It's much easier to just turn off all the social media, unfollow everywhere. I know we've been dating for 6 months, but I'm just going to now ignore every text, ignore all your calls, and think about it we talk about service. Think about the service or disservice we do the other person. From their point of view, it's like you got in a car accident. It's like you were just killed. It's like you just disappeared off the planet. That is trauma. Because you're uncomfortable to have an uncomfortable conversation. You would do that to another person. So service goes both ways, which is I will make myself uncomfortable and have a difficult conversation, even if I bumble it and screw it up and it ends up being a screaming match. Because that is a better option than traumatizing yourself and have to believe there's a lot like that, panic. And then when they realize I'm alive, because they're seeing me on Instagram, that now I've destroyed their self-confidence. How dare somebody do that? Because you're just a little uncomfortable having an uncomfortable conversation. Where we can help is we can teach people how to have uncomfortable conversations. That is a skill set. We don't teach leaders how to have uncomfortable conversations. We don't teach students how to have uncomfortable conversations. We don't teach, we can teach these things all over the place. And I think it's a big gaping hole in curriculum. We teach, maths and we teach English, but we don't teach social interaction. We don't teach listening. We don't teach how to have uncomfortable conversations. We don't teach how to give and receive feedback. Now you tell me which is going to be more valuable for the rest of your life: how to have a difficult conversation or trigonometry. And shouldn't we be, shouldn't we be preparing people for life?
I had a few words to say about one of my sponsors on this podcast. As the seasons have begun to change, so has my diet. And right now, I'm just going to be completely honest with you, I'm starting to think a lot about slimming down a little bit, because over the last probably the last 4 or 5 months, my diet's been pretty bad. And it started to show a little bit. Really, over the last 2 months, I go to the gym about 80% of the time. So I track it with Tony. The WhatsApp group is tracked online that we all use together. We call it Fitness Blockchain. And I'm currently at 81%. So 81% of the days I've done a workout in the last 150 days. Right? So I'm going to the gym about 6 times a week. That's been a little bit impacted by the diet. And so one of the things I'm doing now to reduce my calorie intake and trying to get back to being nutritionally complete and naive is I'm having the pure protein shake. The salted caramel is my favorite. I've got the banana one here, which is the one my girlfriend likes, but for me, salted caramel is the one. On that point of that new generation in the workplace and how they're exhibiting traits of being a little bit more cowardly, in terms of having those difficult conversations. You made a video about millennials in the workplace that did probably hundreds of millions of views. I remember seeing on Facebook maybe 5 years ago. But I'm thinking now about that new generation that you described, that young generation, Gen Z generation, are emerging into the post-COVID world. What is the workplace for them? What is the leader nature of what have we got to know about that and do to make sure that those guys stay motivated?
This is my own thoughts. I don't like the conversation of strength and weakness. Famous question, you know, in an interview, what's your biggest weakness? You know? I don't like the conversations of strengths and weaknesses because strengths often have liability, really confident. Okay, in the wrong context, you're arrogant, right? But weaknesses also have silver lining. So for me, I'm chronically disorganized. I'm terrible, right? Every system app works for like a week and then I'm back. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Now for you, it's a myself up for it. It's a bad thing. So the reality is it's context. So I was as a young entrepreneur, I was at this networking event, and I met this guy and he was like really impressed with what I had to say with my pitch. He was like, Simon, here's my business card. And I lost the business card basically as soon as he did. So anybody who was organized would get a text from the taxi or at least send an email the next day. Not Yahoo. I lost the business card. There's no way for me to find out what this important piece of business was led to because I lost the card. 2 weeks later, I found the business card of the government. So I emailed him. I said, hey, remember we met 2 weeks ago? I'd love to reconnect and see what the work is. He wanted to work with me more because he thought I was busy. So strength or weakness? The answer is it depends. Now, in general, yes, it is a weakness. It's a liability, and it causes mistakes.
What's going on, Jess? Amber. What's going on, guys? We're about to start these pins. Are you ready to see them?
Of which some of them in certain contexts are huge strength, and some of the exact same characteristics in the wrong context are huge weaknesses. Right? So it's very careful to label people or generations as being strong or weak. The answer is depends. Okay, so that's the preface. When we talk about this young generation, the Gen Z generation, they exhibit many of the same characteristics as the previous generation, but they're quite different in the sense that they're very activist. Okay? So, for example, in the 1950s and 60s, people hated their jobs back then too. They just went to work every day and just suffered inside. By the time you get to the 80s and 90s, people hated their jobs. But then they at least start talking about
What's going on, everybody? Oh, yeah, this is looking really good. These look really well. I was really hoping to get a nice. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Yeah, it looks really good. I really hoping to get a nice engraving on these. I like the engraving we've been able to get on these, so we're gonna move forward.
Hashtag tweet my discontent as I'm sitting in the but this young generation gets out. Plus or minus. Depends. Sometimes it's a huge sometimes it's we talk about as well. We have something to do with and so I think the way we have to approach all of these things is with that, which is instead of deciding the strengths and weaknesses, try to understand their function. Because I can say this generation is irresponsible and they'll quit before they ask a raise. Or I can say, why is it that they're quitting before they go just need a raise? What happened between A and B in that whole situation? You know, and I'm like, oh, they just need to quit. I'm not labeling a whole person of their generation. We all, when you ask me about any of this, we all have strength and we all have liability. And depending on the time frame and the context, sometimes those strengths also become old-fashioned, no longer necessary. You know, they can still cause frustration, they can still cause confusion. You know, we're still looking through our own prisms of our own generation. I've definitely caught myself doing it. You know, I do it. My goodness, we never did that when we were kids. You know, when I was their age, I'm actually saying that. But I think the trial.
How is this the COVID experience? How like business people make sure we don't lose people and unattractive place to work as opposed to Europe. And also on the point, you talked to us earlier about the importance of the social time and really that social connection, the big we're optimizing that out of our lives. It feels to me like this remote working thing has exacerbated the issue because we're, for young people, I think that the office is one of the few institutions we have left where we are in person, when we get dating, we get out, food, we don't go to restaurants anymore, we just order Uber Eats. And our work, they're telling us we're going to go to Zoom. I'm like, what do we have left? Yeah, really lonely.
And it's not a coincidence that we see that. And now Amazon open stores. Turns out the extremes are not great places. It's not the death, it's live alongside. They become different animals. They become different reasons. We go to shops not to get the best deal. We go to websites to get the best deal. We go to shops because it's fun. We go to shops to try stuff on. We go to shops because it's an activity. Because our hunter-gatherer instincts, we like foraging. Entertainment. We enjoy the service of it, It's with our friends. Sometimes it's not about the shops at all. It's just a place, something to do with our friends. Plays a different role. And the smart retailers know that. And so when we talk about work, it's the same. It's the death of the corporate headquarters, it's the death of the office. I'm like, keep it down. The reality is, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And I think one thing with all the predictions about what the future of work looks like, one thing is the absolute sure is there'll be more flexibility. Where it used to be, hey boss, can I take off next Friday? Can I work from home next Friday? I have to stay home for whatever, right? Becomes email in the mornings and I'm working. Introverts liking working from home, extroverts like working at the office. But at the same time, sometimes extroverts should stay home because it's more work, and sometimes introverts need to come to the office because they need to connect and not be a good part of the culture. And so I don't think making any predictions about what it will look like is a little foolish at this time. So we know it'll be some sort of amalgamation, we know it'll be more flexible, and probably every office will be slightly different. And it'll fit whatever they expect. And I think that's some really hate this office environment, they'll find another company that they like it. But I think what's really interesting about the Great Resignation is we talk about less the Great Resignation, sort of the reasons for it. Some people talk about the government checks that we've got that much out. Right, and that is definitely a percentage, and I love that, but that's not those numbers are true. I think what I think is more interesting is that the Great Resignation is an indictment of decades of substandard corporate culture and coordination, where and we can feel it with young people, especially at frontline level jobs, which the leadership used to say that they should just be happy to have a job, right? But those people are quitting without any jobs necessarily. It's a big deal. And they're definitely not always responding to it. I think that
And blue fans.
Great reviews. And I don't think enough companies are recognizing that the Great Resignation is an indictment. The Great Resignation is a rather defender that you've been getting away with substandard culture for too long, and you better fix your stuff.
Yes.
I think the companies that will have a huge advantage is not the company with the balance of personal or online or yeah, it's just that. Companies that get a huge advantage moving forward teach leadership skills, teach machine skills that we've been talking about, that create a corporate environment, corporate culture. And one of those for everybody. And I'm willing to sacrifice not just everything about the life. I'd rather be doing corporate those are the things that I huge advantage.
One of the things that I saw in that post-COVID period was, in my company in particular, was how one of the things that I believe from our research, a bit more honesty, in our extreme length. It was in terms of flexibility. You could decide for yourself. And then when COVID came, all about marriage, when COVID came, it smashed our USP. And this is why I almost feel so now, what I think to some degree, I can work at home in my boxer shorts for this company, or I can work at home in my boxer shorts for this company where they'll pay me double. And that shift was, and it was terrifying for us because that's when we started to believe it, because they would go, oh, this company would give me 30% more. I'm still going to be doing my to-do list at home. So what is there truth to that in your view?
Yeah, of course, because what's happened. Yeah. Now, those things are good. Let's not diminish the value of this. But this is a beautiful full circle we're going in the very beginning of our conversation, which is to what end? To what end? What are we doing this in service to?
That was missing.
And that was missing. And that's where cultures become natural. They're fun. Like, you know, the number of companies you and I have both visited that have flat screens everywhere, amazing design, free lunch, you know.
We had a slide.
Yeah, you have a slide. Like, cool. Now is somebody going to turn down a better So I think but it's technical. Which is fun. Don't get me wrong, it's fun. But that's not core. That's not focus. And great cultures are organized to advance something bigger than themselves, not just companies.
The other thing I think we did wrong is I think we asked people what they wanted. Yeah. So they said things like a bar, a basketball hoop, whereas as you're clearly alluding to here, you can't
so those who work there, they recognize that they were part of a revolution. That's part of a revolution. And with iTunes, which more than the iPod, revolutionized the music industry to go from an album culture to a song, not just make music for them, you know. And that was the music they referred to as the music revolution. And you carried it back, you know, and you sacrificed for it. Was it a great place to work? It was a hard place, but it's worth it. And that's the question: are the sacrifices worth it? And sometimes we hide the pain or the difficulties or the strains or the stresses with all the silly fun stuff, which is a salve. Let's be honest. I mean, it does work to some degree, but not all stress is bad. I mean, you know, I joke often when we work hard for something we love, it's called passion. When we work hard for something we don't love, it's called stress. Now, in both cases, you're working hard. You know, what's the difference between, you know, doing something you love and you work late hours and sacrifice your relationships, sacrifice your time? Like, yeah, it was hard, but it was good. You know, versus losing all those things and all you do is get around and doing it again. You know, like, was it worth it? I'm like, yeah, I think I'd rather do that again. You know. And so I think that's what purpose and cause provide us. It's what love gives us. It's the reason for it. It's what children do. It's the reason for it. Your life with family to an entire child. Is it worth it? Yes. Is it easy? It's not hard. Every person I've ever talked to with children say it's the most difficult thing they've ever done. And if you ask them if it's worth it, they'll say yes. That doesn't go together. You know?
When I think about even this podcast and setting purposeful goals for what we're doing here, we definitely fell in the trap of being, like I think a lot of people can get consumed with the charts. Oh my god, we're number one, right? For now, yeah. And then you scratch your head and go, well, then what next? What's a more worthy, more purposeful goal that have with the team when we're building something like this podcast? Because it's so easy to get and that does drive you to something. It seems to be a reason, whether it's thinking or whatever. What is it better than what other what was the version of that? Your podcasting as a media would be an opportunity. I thought that would be a really effective communication. That's great opportunity to grow my personal brand. I'm going to give you all of the reasons, even the selfish ones. Right? Number two, I find it a thrill and deeply compelling and liberating for others to talk about things and feel this way that most people aren't feeling. So in the first episode, we talked about masturbation and mental health problems as a CEO, difficulties with my family, all of those things. I find it liberating for myself. I know for others, especially with feedback, it is equally liberating for them. And then when you so episode one is a really episode one is a bit explained, but as you get to episode two, then it was the feedback. So I was doing a lot of other things on Facebook it was this is why I can relate and really help us and then don't forget the last get to the recent times. And the last one was we took something because those are the same it was enjoyable for myself to see so it feels like it was obsessed really and it's really generating yes so yeah so I guess
start recognizing that you do this, you do this. And if you hit number one, you're now, if so you do that means you have to practice that truth telling with your team. This podcast, you have to live in the microphone, and that starts having a routine. So if that becomes the purpose, rather than being overwhelmed, maybe just people stick around for it, just believe in it.
Is there a role for those other people? Are they useful? To say we want to be number one in the United States, is that a useful goal to set ourselves?
There are companies that you can buy a New York Times bestseller. If they know how to get you to New York Times advertising, how to go to custom features. Physically, you buy books and you buy one you buy. So, and I've had an opportunity to look at the publishers' computers, where you can see any book, you can track any book that's sale, and they showed you that they have a ton work that you can do in the system. And there's some very famous authors that I will not mention on this podcast, who I know for a fact, because I looked at what they brag about other New York Times bestsellers. It's ridiculous. They bought it. It's insane. My wise So, and then I have my car. I just bought a wise one. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm working behind the scenes, trying to work with some really coordinated, really